So this will be a little bit of an unusual show. I set out to do a newspaper sound video. I've got my hot coffee. I love coffee. I drink it black. Some would say I take my battery acid straight. But my subject matter is very delicate. So instead of just basic newspaper crinkling sounds, it's going to end up being more of a show and tell. So we have a history major in our family, and I really love history, particularly American history. And this is a newspaper that my family has kept for many years. It was recently sent to me to keep it for many more years. Even the envelope's old. It says from Grandma's house. I have to be very careful. This newspaper is from 1963, and on this day in 1963 is when President Kennedy died. Here we have this portion here in the Orlando Sentinel. Talking about everything that occurred. They were giving information as they had it. This portion talks about, well, let's just read it together. President slain. Suspect seized after cop shot. Questioned in slaying of JFK. Dallas, Texas. The Dallas Police Department arrested a 24-year-old man, Lee H. Oswald, in connection with the slaying of a Dallas policeman shortly after President Kennedy was assassinated. He was also being interrogated to see if he had any connection with the slaying of the president. Oswald was pulled, screaming and yelling, from the Texas Theater in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. He brandished a pistol, which officers took away from him after a scuffle. Police officer M.N. McDonald, who was cut across the face in the scuffle, quoted Oswald as saying after he was subdued, "Well, it's all over now." A large crowd had congregated around the theater and witnessed the arrest. Police had to hold the crowds back because many apparently connected the arrested man with the slaying of the president. The officer who was slain, J.D. Tippit, had been killed by a man answering the description of Oswald in the neighborhood a short time before. Tippit had been slain with a pistol. I find it interesting that no matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat at this time, people were outraged and incensed and horrified over the slaying of our president, our American president. It goes on to talk about, it says, Lyndon Johnson takes oath in Dallas Kennedy ambushed in motorcade. Can you imagine those words on a paper? Kennedy ambushed in motorcade. I gotta be very careful. This thing's coming apart on me. We'll look at it one time and then we'll be done. I'm going to do my best to show it to you. It's so delicate, obviously, and I don't want to ruin it for the sake of a video. It's obviously a wonderful piece of history. But what I'm seeing is so many of the people that were affected. It's Kennedy over here. Let me show it to you and then I'll read off what I'm looking at. Okay. So in the center there, we're looking at Kennedy as a young man. Here. Here he's a young man. It's a nice family shot right here. Can't imagine what it would be like being responsible for the nation. I know there are people that take on that job. Show it to you in a minute. I don't want to move it around too much. But this says, Sniper slays Kennedy. Lover of Russia charged with fatal ambushing. Johnson succeeds to presidency. A gunman assassinated President Kennedy from ambush yesterday with a high-powered rifle. Nearly 12 hours later, a 24-year-old man who professed love for Russia was charged with murder. The charge was filed against Lee Harvey Oswald, 24. Officers said he was the man who hid on the 5th floor of a textbook warehouse and snapped off 3 quick shots that killed the president and wounded Governor John B. Connally of Texas. As the shots reverberated, blood sprang from the president's face. He fell face downward in the back seat of his car. His wife grasped his head and tried to lift it, crying, "Oh no." Half an hour later, John F. Kennedy was dead, and the United States had a new president, Lyndon B. Johnson. So this goes into detail. It's so interesting to me that this is more reporting things in real time. Now, there's been so much study since then about what really was going on there and what, theories and things like that. But I love this because it's being reported in real time, things that are happening right then and there, and they're putting them in the paper unanalyzed. They're just reporting what's happening. I actually had a family member that remembered the Titanic happening. He told me all about his accounts of the Titanic and what he remembers. And we obviously now know more about that, but when you're in the moment, you're remembering it as it's happening. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that sounds simple, but I like reading stuff like this because this was America's account of it as it was happening. Actually, rolling it seems to protect it more. I might actually have to do that. It's fraying at the sides. I mean, it's from 1963, so it should be fraying. This precious little moment breaks my heart. Everybody knows what this moment is. I don't need to tell you. Can't imagine the pain the family went through. You know, the nation was horrified, but the family went through a lot as well. And so everybody knows. Then we went on to Lyndon B. Johnson. I find this interesting, that on the same paper, number 276 is the paper, it says right here in the center, Cape test scheduled next year. Fort Worth. President Kennedy said today the United States early next year will test a rocket booster at Cape Canaveral, so powerful it will put the nation far ahead of Russia in the space race. The president campaigning as though it were election time in Texas told a rain-soaked, cheering crowd outside his hotel that the rocket booster will be the most powerful in history. The crowd, estimated by police at 5,000, roared approval. It was the first of 4 speeches on the president's schedule today on a swing through Fort Worth, Dallas, and Austin, the state capital. Yesterday he visited San Antonio and Houston, and his whirlwind 2-day tour of the Lone Star State. The audience in a parking lot outside the hotel, Texas, where Kennedy and his wife spent the night, cheered his call for concerted effort to win success in space. I can't read much more. There's holes in the paper. Mrs. Kennedy charms Texans by thousands. Fort Worth, Texas. Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, perhaps reluctantly, is back in politics, and she's a good campaigner. Her smile charmed thousands in San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth yesterday as she began a 3-day Texas tour with her husband, the president. She made a speech in Spanish, and good for her, and drew cheers and applause. She ignored the well-charted plans of Secret Service agents and shook hands with hundreds who were forced to stay behind ropes. Anyhow, I just wanted to share this with you. I feel like it's a little bit morbid topic, but at the same time, it's such a piece of history, of our American history. It's just entrances me once I know the full story, or what we feel is the full story, what we've gathered over the years. Then we go back and we look at the original findings of our American citizens who were reporting during a time of shock and, upset. And they were doing their best at the time. So many people remember where they were when Kennedy was assassinated. I wasn't alive during that time, but I have family members that absolutely remember where they were. Some were sick for days. So again, I set out to make a newspaper crinkling video. I did not do that. It was more of a vintage show and tell. I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. I hope you love history like I do. I don't do a lot of quoting historical facts. I like to just look at the items and discuss them. Maybe I will in the next video if I find something that is worthy of it. Okay, I'm going to put this away. I don't want it to crumble before me. There's little pieces that are coming off, and my hand, the oils on my hand are already touching. So anyhow, my intention is to put this in a frame. Okay, I apologize for not doing more newspaper sounds, but because of the sensitivity of the paper, the fragility of the paper, I just wanted to do a few sounds and a show and tell. Thank you so much for watching. I'll finish my battery acid.